Okay, I've had 10 days with the GFX100, and let me assure you that I've been burning the candle at both ends day and night. Almost every night exclusively. I've been up to 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Been shooting with the camera every day, religiously, at least 4 or 5 hours. I want to appreciate the folks that let me borrow this camera, the GFX100S, to use, and it will come out on the 27th, which is what, like 5 days from now. So I've got a tremendous amount of time on this camera. Not only did I use it tremendously, I spent a lot of time and thought on this camera. This is why there's a second review on this. I know I've already posted the review, but this is the full review, and of course this is final hardware. Obviously, so the firmware will be updated. To what extent, obviously, I cannot speculate. But I had to take a lot of pictures and a lot of notes because I'm including this camera in the second edition of my free book on Fujifilm Helpful Tricks and Tips. And so I had to go over the PDF user manual and the camera over and over again and make sure I had everything down. And of course there are some nuances. Even if you owned every Fujifilm camera and was completely familiar with it, there are more than a few nuances to this camera that are unrelated to its 102 megapixels that you need to know on it. And I've posted a couple tricks and tips videos the past couple days on it. But as this finalized review of the camera, and this is of course leaving open sections for some firmware improvements, which Fujifilm has done with every camera. I would like this to be it, and that's why I had to whip out the large iPad here. Let me get to the point specifically. Let's first talk about, in this final review of the GFX100, what this is. I don't know if you have or have handled the Fujifilm X-H1, but there are 4 holdovers, or bringovers if you will, from the X-H1. Specifically, there is a leaf spring on the shutter release, unlike most every other Fujifilm camera, and Canon and Nikon. You can actually feel the shutter release breaking over, and this actually helps in reducing something that is applied to archery releases and also on finer target firearms where trigger jobs are done, and this helps eliminate outshake, and this is one of the several things that actually eliminate outshake, in addition to Ibis and a few other things we'll talk about in a minute. So we have that brought over from the X-H1. We actually have a 4-point spring suspension. The actual shutter mechanism itself sits on the front magnesium alloy housing of this camera and is independent of the Ibis mechanism. So there is a greatly reduced a shutter shake and shutter shock. Depending on what you shoot, whether it's electronic front curtain shutter or even mechanical shutter, the shutter mech is sitting on a 4-point spring suspension, just like the X-H1 does, which is very stealthy and something that everybody appreciated about the X-H1. And 3, of course, we have the Ibis mechanism, except this has some really huge, beefy copper voice coils in it for stabilization. The larger the sensor is, the harder it is to stabilize, and I've seen images of the huge copper voice coils that are on the Ibis mech that moves the sensor around. The one thing that people forget is obviously the larger the sensor it is, the harder to stabilize. Well, why is that? It's the same reason why a large SUV doesn't take fast corners very fast. I heard that Fujifilm was in development for a very long time on the Ibis mech on this camera, and it is astounding, especially considering that it's a medium format sensor, which has never been done before. So I can see why Fujifilm actually spent an enormous amount of time doing that, but that is also something that was brought over identical to the X-H1, and of course the top LCD display on the GFX100. So we have the leaf spring on the shutter mech, we have this 4-point spring suspension on the shutter mechanism, we have the amazing Ibis mech, and the Ibis mech on this is really amazing. Trust me when I say that. When you actually discover that for yourself, and if you have any experience with medium format, because medium format, all of them suffer from serious shutter shock, even electronic front curtain, because the mechanism is so big. That's an issue, no matter how good your hand-holding techniques are. In making this final review, I want to make some bold statements to clear things up, because people say, well, who's this camera for? Everybody's been asking that question, including people that actually got used to this camera in Tokyo a month ago, and even people that have had their hands on it, a month or month and a half ago. And this is undeniably a game-changer camera. It's a revolutionary camera, and I'm going to spell that out for you here really quickly. But let's first go over the 4 points of what is unique about this camera. And I'm also going to define the fourth point here succinctly, which I gave a lot of thought to. This is the world's first Ibis medium format camera, which I've already mentioned. The world's first fast autofocusing medium format camera, and I'll set that parameter for you. I'll give you an analogy here very quickly. Absolutely, undeniably. It's not like, well, it's a little bit faster than these medium. It's like, no, every medium format camera that exists out there, literally, they're right down here, and the autofocus on this is way the hell up on top of a mountain peak, and I mean that very seriously, and I especially take camera reviews very seriously in telling people things that are not hyperbolic, and I mean that very definitely when I say that about the autofocus on this camera. Thirdly, it's the world's first handheld low-light medium format camera, and that opens this up for a lot of different things. I'll talk about that here shortly. The world's first crossover medium format camera capable of fast autofocus for moderate sports, streets, no flash wedding photography, no flash event, club, handheld, documentary, photojournalism, on and on and on. I'm going to define what a crossover medium format camera is, and this is definitely the world's first. Not my opinion, this flat out is. So, you have the incredible low shake capabilities of this camera due to the extremely powerful and beefy Ibis Mech with its beefy voice coils, the spring suspension on the shutter Mech, and the leaf spring on the shutter release. And let's define this as a game changer and a revolutionary camera, which it is. What specifically is a crossover medium format camera? I think most of you have heard about a crossover car, and back in the days of SUVs, and of course now everybody's kind of driving some sort of SUV, at least here in America anyway. I have a RAV4, I've owned a couple of. It doesn't matter what you prefer, Toyota, Honda, whatever. We're talking about a crossover car. Slightly funny note here, if an earth mover had intimate relationship with a Corolla, we're hauling serious megapixels, yet we get the gas mileage and have the best of both worlds of, say, a zippy, compact two-door car of some kind, combined with nearly the same gas mileage, but the ability to haul the whole family in a lot, across the country, or yourself for that matter. So the GFX100 is kind of like that RAV4 SUV crossover of cameras, which will prove insanely popular. It means you can haul the serious to the whatever event or whatever it is you want to do, street, documentary, indoor, no flash, wedding ceremony. And you have the speed and the versatility because, as I showed you earlier, this camera with viewfinder, not with the tilt adapter, obviously, like I have set right now, is actually the same height and size as an Nikon D850 with a vertical grip. Medium format has always been, I grew up with medium format. I mean, I've owned a lot of medium format cameras, and that's what I used in photography school back in the early 90s. I owned a couple of Hassies, I owned 6-7 Pentaxes. I own many twin lens reflexes, including Rolleis and Yashica mats. Medium format's always been the earth mover of cameras. You didn't drive that baby downtown, or I'll say like a 18-wheeler. You didn't drive that stuff downtown. It was moving the serious. It was for ultimate image output, just like an earth mover is. I mean, you took it to do a serious job, but it was not versatile. It certainly didn't fit in your pocket, but it was also not, the Nikon D4, for example, or something that you would take for, sports action, documentary, photojournalism, whatnot. You didn't do that. The GFX100 is kind of like that SUV or RAV4. You can pick your brand of SUV. I'm just mentioning the RAV4 here. I don't care if you like Toyota or not. It's giving you an analogy. Don't take the analogy too far. Where you can bring the serious out and about. You don't give it a second thought about doing that. And you know it can handle the turns and the small streets and gets good gas mileage. Actually, the battery life on this is, I was actually shocked. With the Ibis and whatnot, you don't have to use 2 batteries. You can only use 1 if you want. The battery usage on this is extremely good, far better than I expected. I mean that seriously. The battery usage on this camera is extremely good. Do not even think a second thought about the battery usage on this camera, about it being a battery hog. Well, it's Ibis and it's fast auto. I bet this camera's about, no, it's not at all. So, who is the GFX made for? The GFX100 specifically. Let me be specific on that, because I keep seeing that question asked over and over again. All current medium format users, obviously so. Because, you know, right now, of course, we're getting into the fact that it is a new sensor. It's the IMX461 sensor. It's a 102 megapixel backside illuminated sensor. So we know we have new sensor technology. We know it's a backside illuminated, which gives you a stop and a half. Better for low light. And of course, you're cramming twice as many megapixels on the exact same sensor. And of course, that has to be offset with some technological improvement, which is the BSI sensor. And also, there is a small issue with BSI sensors, which is bleed over, because the actual registration layer is so much higher, but I've not noticed any bleed over issues on this at all. I assume that Fujifilm mastered that in their own specific micro lens design array, which sits over top of the sensor. If you want to read about BSI bleed over as opposed to a conventional sensor, you can research that on your own. So the GFX is made for, of course, all current medium format use, obviously so. You know, which is hardcore product, commercial, corporate, interiors, and landscape, but that's only the first layer. I mean, this is not, you know, that would be impressive if Fujifilm, well, Fujifilm came out with a unibody design with an integrated vertical grip, except now it's a new sensor, and, well, that's all well and fine. You know, it's another huge, slow, and every medium format is slow out there, until now. And trust me, when I tell you that, you damn well better listen. You damn well better listen. I'm dead serious about that. This camera is fast. I'll very quickly tell you what fast is on this camera, because I have all the GFX lenses. Currently there's 8. There's 2 more on the registry is coming out, the 40-100 next year, 2020, and the 50mm f3.5 later this fall. This camera is fast. How fast? The last firmware of the XT2 with the 18-55, for example. That's pretty damn fast. How fast is that in the medium format world? Really damn fast in medium format. That's absolutely unheard of. Nothing comes even close to that. Nothing. Not my opinion, hardcore fact. So now on top of the layer of all current medium format use, which is for ultimate image output, right? So it's like, I don't want to screw with the medium format, but the client wants it, or I need ultimate image output. I just need something for landscape or commercial or product that's just unbelievable. You know, I just zoom in for miles. I got tons of dynamic range, which is what medium format has and always has been. It's slow, it's bulky to an extent. I never cared about it being bulky, but other people piss and whine about everything. It's too bulky, or it's too expensive. But now on top of that, with this camera, for the first time ever, and that sounds like a commercial for Fuji. It's not, it's a fact. For the first time ever, you've got ultimate image output on top of the icing on the cake, if you will, of what medium format always has been. The ability to easily, without a second thought about taking this camera out and about, able to use this for documentaries, street, moderate action, indoor photography, handheld, low light, no flash event, wedding ceremonies, photojournalism, on and on and on and on. That is 100% not opinion, not subjective, objective, hardcore fact. The world's first medium format camera that you can do that with. I'm serious as a heart attack when I tell you that. Look into my eye. If I'm lying, I'm dying. Because if I say something extraordinary about this camera, people will, you know, stick a knife in my back after. I bought this camera and you said it would do this and it didn't do it. Now, I'm not going to be found guilty of that. I'm not. I take camera reviews very seriously, and I went, that's why I got so many bags underneath my eyes. I've literally been up to 5 a.m. every night, out shooting all day long, thinking about this camera. I even took a nap in my bed. I was so tired once I fell asleep, so I could actually say I slept with this camera once. I got to return it tomorrow, but I will have my own. You going to buy this camera? Absolutely. Does a bear poop in the woods? Yes, I'm buying this camera. I'm actually meeting a guy next week and selling my Nikkor 600mm f4, which is a monster lens, about as you know, as tall as a little person, you know, to make up, you know, what I lack for the purchase of this camera. Yeah, you saw me kissing it. Get a laugh out of that? You want to see me kiss it again? I'll do it again. I'll wipe those kisses off before I send it back to Fujifilm. Here's another thing. Everybody thought, well, you know, that's great. This camera looks really interesting maybe before the reviews came out. It's like, well, the Hasselblad X1D, let's see what the Mark II. That is not even designed to compete with this camera. It's designed to compete with the 50S and 50R. Exact same sensor in it. They did cut the price way the heck down. But I mean, other than an OLED display and a larger LCD, that camera with its 3 primary lenses, and leaf shutter lenses are really expensive, by the way. That camera, which is not even, this is hilarious, which is not even designed to compete with this beast, which is 1,000 times superior to it in every way imaginable, is still over, I think it's 1,200, let's just say 1,000. It's still $1,000 more than this camera with its three primary lenses. I'm calling primary, but the equivalent, which is the 32 to 64, the 63 millimeter, and the 110. I believe those are the 3 primary ones. That's absolutely ridiculous. If anybody tells you that this camera is expensive, just please tell them compared to what? The slower than a constipated turtle Mamiya Leaf Credo is just the bare camera is $8,000 more than this thing. I mean, that just, this camera is not expensive for what it is. Is the GFX 50S has evolved into a medium format XH1. Let me draw up, because people remember kind of halfway funny, crazy stuff when you give a good analogy. If you put the speed of the XT2 with the last firmware into a blender with the advancements, ergos, Ibis, leaf spring shutter release, and top display of the XH1, and this 4-point spring suspension of the shutter Mech of the XH1 into a blender, and then put all of that into a blender and inserted the latest backside illuminated medium format IMX 141, 461, excuse me, IMX 461 102 megapixel sensor, what you would end up with is this, the GFX 100. What it is a massive expansion, as I said in the prior video, of the bandwidth or box or the parameters for use of medium format that's ever existed before today. That is really about the best analogy I could tell you of what a crossover medium format camera is, and I had to think a while to define that, because this is the world's first crossover medium format camera. This is an XH1 part of an XH1 in a blender with the speed of an XT2 and medium format. This is basically kind of like an XH1 on steroids, except with the latest technology medium format sensor. That's a pretty close analogy. Except, of course, it has an integrated grip. Like I said, you don't have to use 2 batteries. You can only use 1. Uses the exact same batteries as both current GFX cameras, the 50S and the 50R. So, anyway, as I said again in recapping, I've spent a lot of time with this camera, and I had to take a lot of pictures, just do a lot of technical stuff, but done a lot of shooting with it also. Taking a look at a lot of images with this camera. Like I said, with 32 gig cards, you get, I think it's 189 images. Once you format them, it's like 182, and that's if you do what I do, which I shoot superfine JPEG plus 16-bit lossless RAW compressed. So if you shoot 16-bit lossless RAW and superfine JPEG, why do both? Because it actually makes it really easy to edit and post. You could actually preview the JPEGs and then select the RAW files. It makes editing a lot easier, post-production a lot easier. If you do that, that's with 32 gig, 189, so you double that for 64 gigs. I think that actually best explains it up. So this is the reason why I had to do a second final review of the GFX 100. I can't wait to get mine. I can actually tell you flat out, no nonsense, that this is the one camera in all memory that I could think of that I'm actually extremely anxious on the GFX 50R, because that's a camera I waited for 10 years as a compact, inexpensive rangefinder. I mean, I'm never going to get rid of that camera, by the way. Love the GFX 50R. That's definitely the one camera that I'm holding on to. I don't know about keeping the S. I might, but considering the fact that I'm selling my super huge, super expensive Nikkor lens to fund the purchase of this lens, the last few dollars that I need, I don't know if I'll get rid of that or not, but that's not part of this review. But this is a revolutionary, game-changer camera. World's first crossover medium format, and the autofocus is fast. And I've heard people say, well, it's a pretty expensive camera. I heard a lot of people call this a niche camera. And you're going to be proven wrong on that. You think, well, it's $10,000, pretty expensive. Yeah, if you're a hobbyist plinking around. But there are a lot of people that have, moderate amount of disposable income, and for working professionals, Fujifilm is going to sell the hell out of this camera. They are. Oh, sure, it's just fanboy talk you're saying there. Sure, sure, sure. Oh, no. Trust me when I tell you this. It is. Fujifilm is going to sell the hell out of this camera. They are. What this camera is capable of, and the fact that you can take enormous, huge images where they just go on for miles and miles. Handheld. I've taken an enormous amount of shots with this at 1/10 of a second, an 1/8 of a second. Handheld! For God's sakes. By the way, if you're shooting ambient, handheld, always be, no flash photography, okay? Ambient, handheld, low light, always be an electronic front curtain. I explain this in my free book, which is in the link below. If it's no flash, ambient, slow shutter speeds, not Mech shutter, electronic front curtain shutter. And this camera is just freaking amazing. Fujifilm really, 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 and really then some pulled off a winner. To redefine medium format and make it fast and versatile, absolutely bleeping unheard of. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you like this video. If you do, you could drop a buck or two in the link below. I think I'm going to get a day or two of sleep because I'm exhausted. I've been burning the candle at both ends on this camera. The only sad thing I have to say about this camera is that I have to wait for mine, and I have to box this one up and send it back. That makes me sad. One final kiss before I go? Oh yes, let's do that so you can make fun of me. He's kissing the camera. He's a fanboy. Oh, I'm a real fan of this camera. Look in my eye and tell me if I'm lying. By the way, Fujifilm, I'll wipe off those kisses before I send it back. Thank you.